Welcome back to the Smart Driving Cars podcast. Thank you for spending time with us once again. I'm Fred Fishkin, along with the Faculty Chair of Autonomous Vehicle Engineering at Princeton University, Alan Kornhauser. Hi, Alan.
Hey, good morning. This first day of June. We're into June of 2026. My goodness,
Made
sixth
it that
month.
far.
Ooh, summer is near.
And the weather's nice, right?
Finally. Ooh.
And with us once again from Sweden, the co-author of The Real Case for Driverless Mobility, consultant and publisher of Mobility Industry Insights, Michael Senna. Hi, Michael.
Hi, Fred. Hi, Alan. Great to be with you again.
Has the snow melted yet?
The snow is it's almost melted. Yeah, the glaciers are sort of still in the process of flowing into the rivers. Yeah.
I don't know if anybody saw the video from the top of Mount Washington, I guess on Friday. Top of Mount Washington got like 6 inches of snow on Friday or Saturday.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's good.
whoa.
Yeah, that's what Mount Washington is there for.
I guess that's what it's there for, yes.
Well, Michael, in the June edition of Mobility Industry Insights, the focus is on enabling driverless mobility to work for riders requires the right laws for the right reasons. You say driverless vehicle law making is missing the objective function and therefore the point. So give us the overview.
Well, the overview is simple. There's been a spate of proposals for new laws, and all of them are focused on what driverless technology is going to do. The main reason for most of these laws, and there were two and proposed. One is called Stay in Your Lane. I love the names of these. Stay in Your Lane Act, Self-Drive Act are the two main proposals. And then there's the 2026 Surface Transportation Reauthorization Bill that's coming up. And they're all focused on technology. But the more we think about it, the more we understand that the reason for this, the reason that they are technology oriented, is because the organizations that are proposing them, whether they're at the state level or at the federal level, they're not in the mobility business. Even though the Department of Transportation says our dream is the golden age of transportation is now begun. Happily, I think he means that it's going to be a period where things will be better rather than gilded. The Department of Transportation is in charge of ensuring that there are roads and bridges and the avenues on which cars and trucks and buses and trains and airplanes can travel, because they take the full range. NHTSA, National Highway, is in charge of safety. They're not in the business of providing mobility. They're not in the bus business. They're not in the taxi business. They're not in the driverless or otherwise business. They're in the business of safety. So the laws that are being proposed and the suggestions for how to improve transportation are primarily related to safety, because there isn't anyone who's in the business of providing mobility that's affordable, or mobility that's meeting certain needs of individuals. So what I've tried to do in this June issue of Mobility Industry Insights is to explain what the laws are, what proposals are, and then to try to move from that position to the position where we might be getting more transportation for more people. But that's going to take a different level of legislation. In fact, it's going to take another department within the Department of Transportation if this is going to be going to make any difference in the near term. A group within the government at the federal level, which has responsibility for how people move, not just on what they move or in what they move. And that's what this issue is focusing on.
And thus far, most of the action has taken place at the state level when it comes to permitting many of these technologies to be used on the roads. And that's not what we're seeking here, I suppose.
No, the states decided to play in the federal sandbox because Department of Transportation and NHTSA were not doing their job. They were not doing the kinds of things that were necessary to allow the Waymos and the other companies to be able to test their vehicles without having special laws to decide what they would and wouldn't be able to do. There was enough pressure on the part of California to require them to do something. And what they did was to establish certain regulations that applied in certain locations, like initially San Francisco, and then extended throughout the state. So the Division of Motor Vehicles, and the Department of Transportation in California took the matters into their own hands. What the legislation that's now being proposed is principally intended to do is to get the states out of the legislation business and into deciding how cars and trucks and pedestrians move on their streets. But to put driverless vehicles, they continue to call it autonomous vehicles, but put driverless vehicles under the jurisdiction of the federal government, primarily NHTSA. And that's what these three regulations that are in process and other regulations are intended to do. Now, the states continue to try to do what the federal government hasn't done, so that tests can be done. But unfortunately, we have situations like for example, in New Jersey with proposed legislation that would do similar things as what's being done in California, with one major difference. The proposed legislation in New Jersey says you can't have driverless cars. You have to have somebody behind the wheel, and we're doing that already. And we have cars that could be driven in driverless mode, but we're providing rides, and we're doing that as part of a test of the concept of delivering affordable rides to a large number of people within communities. And I think we can talk a bit more about that. It sounds to me, based on what I've listened to, the conference that just took place in Boca Raton, and also some other things that I've been hearing, people are beginning to finally understand that it's not the technology that's important, it's what the technology is supposed to be doing. The technology is supposed to be delivering rides for people who can't drive their own cars for whatever reason. They aren't able to afford to have their own cars. They can't drive their own cars. And that's what our primary message is. The main purpose for driverless cars is to be able to deliver affordable rides to people who need to go to the same places that people go with cars, but don't have the possibility of using cars.
And lawmakers at the different levels have primarily, I think, focused to this point on the safety aspects of this, not on giving rides. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, they've focused on the safety aspects of it because it's the only thing that they can control. There isn't anyone at a legislative level, whether it's at a state level or it's at a federal level. There's no one who's in the business of providing real mobility. The states, even though there are city or regional transport authorities that have been set up after 1950s, 1960s, everybody went out of business. the government's got into the business of running trains and running buses. They haven't gotten into the business of running taxis, although there are kind of metropolitan vans that deliver rides, and there are contracts for providing rides to people with taxis and transport network companies. But there needs to be another focus on the part of the governments, both at the state level and at the federal level. But it has to come from the federal level. It has to be nationalized, because this is like commercial operations. People don't just drive around in their city. They don't just drive around in their state. They go between states. They travel between states. I mean, there are cities like in St. Paul and Twin Cities, Minneapolis, where people do travel back and forth between two different jurisdictions. And Kansas, between Missouri and Kansas. But even so, it's normal that most people, we drive our cars and we see that most people around us are in the same state. They have the same license plate. But then suddenly you cross the border and you think, well, where are all those cars that were in New York? And am I the only one driving into Pennsylvania from New York? But as you drive further, you find that, there are lots of people who come from New Jersey and Florida and even other countries like Canada. So it has to be at a federal level. We can't have 50 different jurisdictions. And this is the kind of thing that's happening in Europe, because with type approval, the process occurs in one country, and then the laws are incorporated into the legislations in each of the countries automatically. And somebody doesn't say, well, I don't want to have that. Once it's type approved, it's incorporated into the laws of all of the countries.
Well, the opportunity has to be for it to be across Europe and across the United States. These vehicles, mobility is an interstate commerce type of thing. It's not an intrastate commerce. It shouldn't. There's got to be an overarching regulations that allow this across state lines. I mean, it's the same thing that's happened, with respect to trucking. I mean, there is an 80,000 pound limit or whatever it happens to be with respect to trucks. And you can't have a state saying, oh, no, you can only have 60,000 pounds in our state, because it's part of, interstate commerce. And so these regulations, either in terms of the implications on the pavement or the implications on safety, need to be set up and overarched on a national basis. The whole question with respect to the safety, safety is, I guess, and that is why we have public oversight on things. Is it anything different than when electricity was just coming onto the market, whether it be AC or DC? There was a safety aspect of it. And so I guess you have United Laboratories or somebody else who's put out there all the safety aspects to make sure that people don't electrocute themselves on this newfangled technology that all of a sudden gives you light. Instead of burning your house down with oil or whatever, or killing all the whales or however else you were going to generate light at night. One now has this new gizmo that the electricity to generate that. And so we've been through this. We've been through the beginning of it. We've been through the buildup and the problems with respect to safety. I think where I see us today is that the safety question is becoming moot, because the data that's coming out, at least the current data of those who are doing it well, is absolutely phenomenal with respect to safety. And the unsafe elements of this, everybody is realizing, is the human in the loop in this driving business. Anybody, I mean, riding around on the freeways in Florida yesterday, I mean, I thought people were crazy here in New Jersey. I mean, it's just like it's nuts on 95. Okay, and the problem is the human in the loop, and I think the whole discourse is about to change. And it would be nice if the insurance entities of this country, instead of just totally focusing on becoming rich and making money, would all of a sudden say, "Oh my goodness, uh, insurance rates, it costs you more if you're going to drive because you're less safe." Okay, and we'll have to pick up less. Now, of course, there are all the ambulance chasers out there. I guess I won't be popular among them. They happen to be all the legislators that end up writing the laws, whatever. I mean, it seems like might be a little bit of a conflict of interest in all that stuff. But my goodness, look at any of the current data and these things. My own personal experience, I can't drive that well. I've never been able to drive that well. I've never been that courteous. Never been that nice on the road.
Everything that we're doing right now is based on laws that were established in the 1960s and in 1970. The Department of Transportation Act of 1966 established the DOT. And someone by the name of Najib Halaby, who was at the time the chief federal aviation, head of the chief of the Federal Aviation Agency, said to President Johnson at the time, "We need to have an organization that's in charge of all of transportation." And Johnson took him at his word, and they combined the Commerce and FAA, and they created the Department of Transportation. That was in 1966. 4 years later, under President Nixon, NHTSA was established. And NHTSA was established with three different organizations. The Highway Safety Act put together the National Traffic and Motor Vehicle Safety Act, and they had three different organizations that were organized, one bureau, two agencies, that were formed into the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration. It's the Transportation Safety Administration. They didn't establish the National Highway or the National Mobility Association, and they didn't establish the Department of Mobility for people. It's the Department of Transportation. And you look at the missions of each one of these organizations, even though they say we want to provide, in the case of DOT, we want to provide a good transportation options for all of our citizens. They don't establish anything. They don't build national railroads. They build roads. They provide funding for it. They provide funding to build the railroads. But it's not their job to see that everybody gets to work on time. That's not what they do, or that they get to the hospital. That's up to the businesses that are operating. But in order for the businesses to be able to do what they need to be doing, there needs to be legislation in place. And that's been the biggest problem that we've had with getting testing done for driverless vehicles, because it's the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards, which are in charge of ensuring that the vehicles that are on the road are safe to be operated. It's not the states who do that. The states are in charge of having the roads with proper signage, with proper speed limits, ensuring that the roads are not filled with with debris and that people are able to drive on the roads properly. But it's the vehicles are the responsibility of the federal government. And these two things don't necessarily work in concert, and they haven't been. So now the federal government is saying, well, we really do want to get control over this, but they're doing it with the only tools that they have. And the only tool they have is safety. It's both for the federal motor vehicle standards and for other aspects of what these organizations are doing. There has to be another approach to this. There has to be a better way of providing financing, encouragement for the development of business cases for mobility. And that doesn't exist.
Well, I agree with you on all that. It's I guess it's got to be 15 years ago, or at least, if not before, a conference similar to the one that just occurred in Boca, about all this, that I actually, raised my hand and said we need a new administration in DOT. That we have one for cars, FHWA, we have one for pipelines, we have one for airplane, mass transit. We need one for automated vehicles. Okay, and in fact, it probably needs it, and that should also one that should have not only safety as its objective. If your objective is safety, and especially if you have a vision zero, you know how to reach vision zero? Don't move. Stay home.
That was the
home.
proposal.
Okay, that's how you reach vision zero. But that
was
come
a
on,
thesis.
I mean that's almost ludicrous.
Yeah, well, that was a
Absolutely
thesis of
ludicrous.
one of the professors in Sweden when I first started working for Volvo. Someone said, "Well, have you read this guy's reports? He's saying that we can reduce deaths on the highways in Sweden if everybody stops driving." So, well, that's novel. That's interesting.
Oh my goodness! I mean, stay home. Okay, but I like to say, if I stay home, my house burns down, and I die in a house fire. I died anyway. I mean, what the hell? Thank you for you. You shouldn't get any great credit for Vision Zero. You caused me to be home, and when my house burned down. But whatever. That's almost. It is so silly. It's unbelievable. Okay,
yeah. But by the way, don't mix Vision Zero with what I said, because there's another Swede who worked for the Swedish National Road Administration, who came up with the concept of Vision Zero and ways to get the number of deaths and accidents on roadways down. And his name escapes me for the moment, and his work put the number of deaths on roads from somewhere like 5,000 to 250. So that's his Vision Zero.
But that's a vision down. That's not a vision to zero. That's not zero. I mean, if you're so obsessed with zero, come on. NHTSA, the number of regulations NHTSA has tried to put out there over the years with respect to bumper crash worthiness of 5-mile-an-hour bumpers and a whole bunch of other stuff out there that was supposed to stop cars from crashing, and then the 12-mile-an-hour or whatever automated emergency stuff that the IIHS did videos on. That was just, there was only one system that worked. I think it was only Subarus, and everybody else's, couldn't. And now I guess in 2029, the existing legislation is in 2029, we're all finally going to have technology in our vehicles that are not going to avoid crashes, as long as you're going under whatever 12 miles an hour, and actually do avoid crashes, apparently, whatever the regulations are. What at least some of the situations that exist today, at least I guess with Waymo and with Tesla, is that, boy, those darn things do work. And even though, maybe Waymo's unfortunately tried to go across a road that was that was under, flooding conditions and got stuck and so on. Do you know how many other people who were driving themselves probably got themselves stuck in equally bad situations? And so that's some bad, unfortunate press, but that's all fixable by them. Those things, my goodness, the data coming out is just so overwhelmingly safer, I'll claim.
You've both alluded to it. This conference that took place in Boca, Guidant and the Jacksonville Transportation Authority, they had their 5th annual autonomous vehicle conference just a few days ago. Alan, you were a participant, and so was the Assistant Secretary of Transportation for Research and Technology at the DOT, Seval Oz. I think maybe we can take a little look at some of what she had to say. She started out with a video that she'd been involved with 15 years ago when she worked for Google.
Good morning, Steve.
Hey, Nathaniel, how are you?
Doing just great.
Go ahead, Steve.
Auto driving.
Here we go.
Away we go. Look, Ma, no hands.
No hands anywhere.
No hands, no feet.
No hands, no feet, no nothing.
I love it. So we're here at the stop sign. Yep. The car's using radars and laser to check and make sure there's nothing coming either way.
I find myself.
Old habits die hard, man. They don't die.
Hey, anybody up for a taco?
Yeah. What do you want to do today, Steve?
I'm all for Taco Bell myself.
All right. Well, let's go get a taco at the drive-thru. And we're turning into the parking lot. Yep. How neat. There we go. Now we kind of creep along here. Does anybody have any money?
I've got money.
No, I've got my wallet right here. You roll down your window and order a burrito.
Yeah, push that up. I'm doing very well. How are you today? This is some of the best driving I've ever done.
95% of my vision is gone. I'm well past legally blind. You lose your timing in life, everything takes you much longer. There are some places that you cannot go, there are some things that you really cannot do. Where this would change my life is to give me the independence and the flexibility to go the places I both want to go and need to go when I need to do those things.
Get out. I've got places I have to go. It's been nice. It's been nice.
Thank you all. I don't know if I'm talking from this mic or this mic, but if I can walk around, it'll be better. In 2011, I made a short film. The founders of the company, Google, wanted me to show how autonomous technology could change people's life. So I found Steve Mon, who was formerly a graphic designer who had lost 85% of his eyesight to macular degeneration. It took him 3 hours and 4 different modes to get to work because he wanted to still show up and do something productive with his life. So he was the director of the he was the director of the Blind Center in Silicon Valley. And we searched and found a way to bring back and restore some of his freedom, some of his dignity, because you can see movement is essential to life. It's one thing we take very much for granted, that if we do not move, we atrophy. If we cannot visit our loved ones, we isolate. And we eventually lose our willingness to live. So it's critical that we start measuring up to certain technologies that are available to change that coming forward 15 years. The true promise of autonomous vehicle technology is being built as we speak now by most of you in this room today. I'm very excited and privileged and honored to have been asked to speak, because so much of what you're doing right here, right now, is a part of what we're trying to do up in Washington. We're making transportation a vital utility, and I believe, I have a vision that soon families may even be able to subscribe to mobility's capabilities just like they do their water, their electricity, and other types of utilities. So it's great to be here in Boca Raton. I'm excited, and I wanted to thank our friends at Guidant, our friends outside, Carson, ADAS Tech, Mika, Holon, Volkswagen, Moya, Beep. You all are at the frontier of really changing the way in which we have built research and technology, from the first self-driving car in 2011 to what we have today. Thousands of vehicles ready to deploy and already in use. We are at a major historic turning point. You all will look back on this as I look back at my career in 2010 and first started on the self-driving car team, when we were 14 engineers and people coming out of the DARPA Urban Challenge programs. It's time to transform and transmit technology in transportation science. For decades, we solved problems in Washington by pouring concrete. Today, we must do more. We must digitalize and modernize the movement of goods, people, and services. And for that, we need data, right? I think many of the folks in my team hear me saying, in God we trust, everyone else bring data. We must use artificial intelligence. We must use these connected technologies and embed large language models into recognizing patterns, recognizing learnings across all platforms, and release these new platforms for movement. Not just in vehicular side, but we have eVTOLs, we have drones, we have a whole new array of spatial technology that's hitting the curb as well. Our goal is clear. We are here to connect all modes of transportation to improve safety, eradicate congestion, optimize the flow of freight, and that is how we lower prices at the store, basically. This is how we give our families back the time they need and be clever about the way in which we move across the country. We have a bold mission at the US DOT to prioritize the safe scaling of autonomous vehicles. You'll hear from our NHTSA deputy, Pete Simshauser, who's here today, who will be speaking as well to you all. Safety is our North Star as we integrate this AV technology responsibility, but innovation gets us there. That is what brings us into that new safety envelope space. So safety always, innovation every day. The days of building research in sandboxes are over. We must build the public trust now through transporting safety data, and we know exactly where to start. We start with rideshare. We start with public transportation. Public transit and shared mobility are the bedrock of community movement. By mastering safe autonomy in these areas, we prove the technology in controlled, high-impact environments. And from there, we take our learnings and we scale across the nation. Maybe we drive differently around these vehicles because computers drive differently than humans. Those are things we need to learn, study, and prepare for. So deployment is the way we get those shared learnings. How do we unlock the future? Well, through our Transportation Digital Infrastructure effort, TDI. That is something we put out in RFI a few months ago. We received roughly 200 comments and 3,000 plus pages. And we combed those pages. We used our friend Gemini and other fun sort of large language models to understand what you all were interested in and what your consensus was on transportation digital infrastructure. And under the auspices of Secretary Duffy, we are moving at lightning pace. We are cutting the red tape. Much of the procurement to obligation is going down. We're reducing those spin cycles. We're starting with digital corridors for our surface modes. highways, rail, transit, motor carriers, all moving to connectivity and ports, maritime, and other geospatial forms of modes. We hope to seamlessly connect these, but we will not stop at ground transportation. We are expanding this digital network into the air, working on important national security elements such as complementary PNT, which is very important for position navigation and timing at high precision. We're looking at redundant GPS. We're looking at things and researching, tying in under a unified DOT approach, which includes federal aviation. And eventually, we will expand into space commerce. This is the future of American logistics. This is unequivocally America first, and I would not bet against America. So, to build this, we demand results. So there's no more research to nowhere. We're actually needing now scalable, accessible deployment options to adopt and accelerate the speed of AV modality. We are embedding applied research into our own use cases and asking for funds to be used for national strategic transportation deployment science. This vision requires a very strong, persuasive leadership, but also engagement. Events like today matter. We must slow down to thank our public sector pioneer partners. So thank you to the Jacksonville Transportation Authority. You are truly exemplar of the innovation we are seeing today. You are building the operational infrastructure we need. You are proving that public agencies can lead the tech revolution, like we work with partners to build critical infrastructure. Thank you to Florida State College at Jacksonville, and Dean Brower is here today. We salute your work. And as you develop your workforce capabilities now and start thinking about curriculum in transportation science and undergraduate programs, that's something we care about, we would like to support, and it's newly an agenda on our workforce environment. So Jacksonville is building the digital future right now. Look at what your local government is achieving. And we have many, many other programs like this, but in Boca Raton, what we're seeing today is an incredible example of what the innovation campus of the future looks like. You have it here today, everything from the origins of the IBM PC laptop, and if you all haven't taken a chance, please go out and step on the life-size, or actually larger than life-size concrete keyboard. The Autonomous Innovation Center has a centralized operations hub, which is also very critical that we understand transportation operations traffic management system. It manages autonomous fleets safely. It uses a human-in-the-loop model to ensure strict safety oversight. It scales it should scale, and will probably hopefully scale with the help, little bit of the help of our friends in DC, to the entire United States. So I think bringing jobs home, because of our clear regulatory vision and infrastructure investments, we are seeking manufacturers to Florida. This means Buy America compliant vehicles. This means reshoring, retooling of some of the software as well as hardware technology that was built in this country years ago. We have to think about how we're going to restore and reshape some of that. And this eventually leads to American jobs. You increase the size of the pie, you don't necessarily work on how you're going to divide it up. In order to launch what I call A2E, Affordable Autonomy Economy, the Office of Research and Technology at the U.S. Department of Transportation is funding a lot of the digital transformation we're looking at. We are deploying smart grants to communities that prove they can deliver. We are funding university transportation centers. We're investing heavily in digital connected transportation, and we are rebuilding our research portals for accessibility of that data, shareability of that data, and platforms as we move towards more friendly interfaces and shared content. Long-haul autonomous trucking. Trucks are safely now operating across the Dallas-Houston corridor. They're expanding into west to El Paso, and they're expanding east into Jacksonville. One of the problems we dealt with this year was what we called cargo theft and cabotage. The Secretary leaned in on this, and we are announcing every day more and more outcomes of how we're shutting down non-domiciled commercial drivers, which single-handedly was on the road to reducing our spot freight prices and really hurting our trucking industry. Throughout my career, I worked to bring people together around a common mission. A big part of leadership is finding a way to collaborate on something that's more important than you are individually. A collective mission. And earlier this year, as I said, we launched the RFI for Transportation Digital Infrastructure. And I'm very happy to announce that our digital corridors, as we call them, which run across north, south, east, west in the United States, are coming to life as 8 state DOTs under the leadership of Georgia DOT, Russ McMurray, who's head of AASHTO, volunteered to become anchor tenants for the national interstates in the United States. I call them my constitutional Congress, or my Final Four basketball teams. We would like to think about embedding education, university transportation centers into maybe Adopt a Highway. But right now, we are not looking to boil the ocean. Instead, we are building competitive regional clusters across the interstates in the United States, working to build up the back end, to bring up the back end of a common data exchange so that we can share interoperably as we go from state to state. So that will lead, hopefully, to a safety envelope, which is proven, and enabling our regulatory environment really to do what they need to do on the national framework for regulatory rulemaking. So we're working in collaboration with our state DOT CEOs, with our industry partners, and with mobile network operating providers to really try to approach standards. We don't want to write the standards. We don't want to be the landlord of software in this country, but we do need to create that kind of federated back-end common exchange data governance for this effort. And this will eventually lead to the interoperability, and that will push forward on scaling the adoption across U.S. highways. Our first use cases are construction zones, lane closures, truck parking, and emergency services. But as we phase in other requirements and other modal activities such as rail, freight, port, this mission becomes the new network of modern digital activity and safety. So as we approach the golden age of transportation, and I like to say this is our declaration of innovation, the golden age shines in the eyes of our students. It vibrates when you ride in a publicly funded AV shuttle in our nation's capital. And we are celebrating innovation this year at our 250th year anniversary. It's also the 70th year anniversary for federal highways. And along those lines, we hope to share the podium with our Federal Highway Administrator, Sean McMaster, on June 9th in Detroit for some interesting announcements we hope will hit the mark in stride. So earlier this year, I visited Mount Vernon with Secretary Duffy and the leadership team, and someone asked, how would George Washington have handled decision-making at this very important but a little bit unsettling moment in time? I thought for a while, and I responded by thanking leadership and my colleagues for never doubting that a small group of thoughtful and committed citizens like you here today can change the world. It is actually the only thing that ever does. Today I'm joined by my family, my friends, the Casaminis, who've spent their years in this country developing technology, computer technology, so we can have a better life. I'm joined by my daughter, who graduated last week from Johns Hopkins in music and brain science. So in the past, we had silos. We had silos of degrees. We had silos of thinking. Today's youth can intersect at two completely different capabilities and bring those together and really improve something we don't even know about, perhaps music's healing of the brain. So the same way that we need to break out of those silos in academia, we need to break out of them right now as we speak in terms of innovation and technology. So be bold, honor our legacy of independence, innovation, entrepreneurship. We have a monumental mission ahead of us, but we will get it done. So God bless you all, and thank you for the opportunity to serve. Thank you.
Alan, you were there for this. So tell us how you received it, and others did as well, because she's talking about some of the things that we've been talking about for a long time here.
Well, the way I came out of it was with two things. One, powerful, and two, as I think I said in the beginning of my comments, is I don't think I have heard from an official, high official at DOT ever a vision for the value propositions of this form of mobility that's been expressed any better than what she was. I just thought it was powerful for the reason. And the important thing is that I think she believes it. I think that this is Seval and Seval's mission as the Assistant Secretary of Research and Development and Chief Scientist. I think this is fundamental because of the video that she presented with Mahan. And that video is something that she was the executive director for. She created that. She was probably the motivations. I mean, certainly she was working with Google and they decided, yes, I'm going to do, and we're going to, but she picked that up and did it 15 years ago. She believes that the mobility piece, having Steve be able to go get his laundry, go get a hamburger or whatever he got, have the mobility, get your hair done, get to work on time, the real value propositions associated with mobility of people for which the current systems, the current array of technology that is available has completely left those folks behind. And as Michael and I, pointed out ad nauseum almost at the end of the sixth summit and in the first book and continue here, that in fact, if you look at the 1.1 billion person trip demand that exists today and will exist tomorrow and existed yesterday and at least whatever in the United States, there are about 100 million, at least 100 million of that demand of where mobility would have led to value increase, improvement of quality of life of individuals. There's at least 100 million of those things that didn't take place yesterday, aren't taking place today, won't take place tomorrow, won't take place the next day. Why? Because for them, their only way to achieve that is to walk or whatever other modes might be available to them doesn't do it for them. And here we have this now new thing, this new thing that all of a sudden might allow them to improve their lives. Why? Because it's demand responsive, higher quality, will do what they need to have done for them, their need. Not what me as an operator, hey, this is what I have to do and create it and take it or leave it. That's the value proposition. That's what's so powerful about not only what Seval said, but the technology is its flexibility to be able to give the person who says, this is what I want to do to improve my life. And my goodness, if it is, there should be an entity, at least in Washington, if not in every state, but let's coalesce in Washington, that says, go for it, make it happen. This is all positive. Plus, it's safer. Cut it out.
And in your
Where's the
panel,
downside?
In your panel, you pointed out that as far as the riders are concerned, the people who need to get from here to there, the technology isn't relevant. They don't even care about it. They just need the ride.
They don't care.
They need the ride.
They don't care. They don't care whether it's being done with, whatever. No, it's having and in fact, if you're really worried, if affordability is a key, and one of the things that Seval pushed on the affordability piece, the affordability, and it's not affordability after you have a sugar daddy or the government or somebody else pick up the tab. It's that the fundamental asset, this thing, cost of goods sold, ends up being affordable. Why? Because
Yeah.
whatever it's taken to put that on, and you divide it by the number of users to do. So for me as an individual, it's
But
easy.
Alan, Alan,
Yeah.
the reason it's affordable.
Yeah.
I've spent many little tests talking with people about this concept, and I always ask the same question. What's the advantage? Here you have a driverless car, and here you have a car with a driver. Why is this option better? And the answer is always, oh, well, maybe it's because it's safer because you don't have people driving drunk or whatever. He said, but what's the effect of having a driverless car? Oh, and most people say, oh, well, somebody's going to lose their job. And then I say, if you take these two cars, the difference between the car without a driver and the car with a driver, the biggest difference between these two, assuming that both of them meet the requirements of being on the road, is that the car without the driver doesn't have the cost of the driver. Now, you said productivity, but productivity is this car is out there 100% of the time, taking away the times that it has to be charged, without the cost of the driver. In any drive that you take in a taxi or a bus, 60% of the cost of that is the cost of the driver. If you take the cost of the driver out of the equation, you have a much less expensive ride, as long as you don't have to put in the equivalent in the cost of technology, the cost of operations of this driverless vehicle. If you assume that you've got the same car doing exactly the same kinds of things at the same level of safety, the difference between the two is the cost of the driver, and the allowance of having that driver gives you the productivity of that vehicle. It's essential.
That's only part of the answer, Michael. The other part of the answer that we are finding, and you're experiencing, and we are finding, and I really don't want to say it because it's not a pretty thing to say, is that the ability to respond to changing demand, because things change.
Yeah. Yes.
Of a thing where that's the machine that's responding,
yes,
versus the person, is so much easier with a machine than it is with the average person. I don't want to suggest that the really good person can't outperform a machine. Absolutely. The question is, can they? Most of the time, just some of the time. And it's tough. It is hard to outperform a machine.
Now,
beautiful.
In Boca Raton.
Nobody appreciates that.
In Boca Raton. Who was talking about that?
Nobody, me. I was the only one.
Okay.
I think. Nobody talked about mobility.
No, of course not.
Nobody talked about the people.
No, you were talking everybody in the audience, people working for NHTSA, people working for DOTs, state DOTs, federal DOTs, everybody. They're all in another business. They're not.
They're another business. They're not. They're in the business of a transit agency who should take very good care of their workers. They should be good to their workers. Yes.
Yeah.
And then, make it so that their life is good. Their life gets it done. And then see whether or not, anybody cares to take their service.
And it's time to change the laws again.
Yeah.
On that topic, Michael, why don't we bring it back to you to really wrap things up? in terms of what you're suggesting in the mobility industry insights?
What I'm suggesting in the mobility industry insights is that we need to bring us back down to 1965, 1966, when people with vision said we need a Department of Transportation. Back in 1970, when people said we need an organization that's responsible for ensuring that the cars and trucks and other vehicles that are on our roads are safe, which is when the NHTSA was established. We need to have a look at providing the incentives from the federal government to the states and to businesses for providing affordable mobility for everyone. That doesn't exist today. The organizations that do exist are focused on safety. They're focused on the technology, but they're not focusing on what that technology is supposed to be doing. It's supposed to be helping people get to where they need to go safely and affordably. Those two things go together. So it's time to take someone to stand up within the government and say, you know, we've done a lot so far for safety. And we have. The number of deaths on the roads compared to the vehicle miles driven is extremely low compared to countries, the countries like in Africa and countries in Latin America, where the numbers of people are dying proportionately to the number of cars is incredibly higher than we have here in both Europe and in the United States. So it's time for someone to stand up within the government and say, we need to establish an organization, not to promote driverless cars or what they call autonomous cars, to promote mobility and to provide the means for putting these vehicles on the roads to be able to achieve the goals that are rider related, not driver related or vehicle related.
Well, I of course, we agree, Michael, and that was the crux of my comment on Friday was that when our experience in giving people rides who really need a ride, and yes, they don't care about what technology was. What they really care about was the mobility that they got, and they got it at a price that was acceptable to them. And if if you look at this really latent demand that exists there it is big. At some point, there are people that can't afford anything, pay anything. So the price is not going to be zero. We're still going to need some public spirited entities that provide subsidies to the very poor, but to progress down the economic spectrum and to progress down the capability spectrum to the too young, to the too old, to the folks who just don't want, who just can't see well enough, as Seval's video clearly shows. The amount of the value proposition, the opportunity to as our mission statement, to help create high quality, affordable communities and the community spiritedness that one finds. And one of the things that happens that with respect to this kind of mobility opportunity is that the whole question about ride sharing disappears. Because in fact, what you can do with the folks who really need a ride, because they tend to be coming from the same community, they are compatible with each other. And in fact, ride sharing becomes actually a positive attribute rather than a negative attribute. So you have all these things working together because this machine has been able to provide the mobility to allow them to improve their lives.
Sounds like the real case for driverless mobility to me. But
Several, this is, I guess, what Michael and I have been trying to push for all this time. And we're not, loose cannons on the ship, that in fact are going to go mow down people and whatever. Whatever. It's a turning point. We are very close to making this happen.
Well, I think that's going to be a wrap on this edition. Michael, thank you again for all of the insights. The website for more is michaellsenna.com. People can find the insights and lots more. You can find more and the newsletter at smartdrivingcar.com. You can also find us these days on the Transportation Channel. We want to encourage you to find us there. They're on Fire TV, Roku, Apple TV as well. Find my tech reports at techstination.com. Thanks again for taking the time to watch or listen, and please stay safe.
Thank you.